The spear sang in the sun. Ash flexed and steel flashed, a slender flicker against the plate-clad bulk that thundered toward him. Oberyn Martell's bare feet read the sand as a harpist reads strings, light and quick, and every bite of the spear point into the mountain's greaves set a new chord ringing in the yard below the Red Keep. Dust rose with the roar of the crowd and hung, gauzy as a veil over a face, over the tight knots of nobles in their shaded stand and the crush of small folk beyond the line of the gold cloak's pikes. "Viper?" someone breathed, a thin ribbon of sound lost beneath the iron drum of Gregor Clegane's boots. He came on with his shield lifted, the black dog's head painted there ruined by old scrapes. His long sword was a slab of sharpened night in his fist. The sun slid along its length and skittered off the battered ridges of his helm. Oberyn moved sideways. The spear worried at Gregor's ankles, bit, withdrew. The mountain's blade boomed down and found sand. The spear kissed his wrist, skipped, then darted again like a second thought reconsidered at the last instant. The head of it glimmered faintly where it had been dipped, and the gleam, to one who knew what gleams mean, said death. The viper's spear point knew why it shone. Above them, a boy king sat still as a carved thing, feet not reaching the floor, hands folded as he had been taught to fold them. The crown on Tommen's hair was too heavy for his neck and too polished for his age. Beside him stood his mother, a blaze of gold and lion red, and beside her a taller shape of iron self-mastery, Lord Tywin Lannister, the Hand. His eyes did not flicker. He could look at the sand, at the wind, at the flash of a spear and see numbers. On the prisoner's dais, Tyrion Lannister watched with wrists bound and mouth dry. He smiled because there was nothing else to do. When the spear struck the mountain's knee again, when Gregor's bellow rolled like distant thunder and the crowd's answering cry washed over the yard, the smile died and something harder replaced it. "Say her name," Oberyn called, voice bright and clear in the glare. His spear moved as if his body were only the haft it had chosen to inhabit. "Elia of Dorne, say her name." Clegane came like a falling tower. The ground trembled. The spear slid aside like a fish through reeds. The mountain's shield thundered against the pillar of the yard, splinters erupting from old oak. Oberyn slid behind him and the spear point licked at the space beneath the beaver. A hiss of breath, dark and stale, puffed from a crack in the helm. The mountain swatted at emptiness as a bull will swat at flies it cannot see. "Say it," said Oberyn, overturning the syllable in his mouth like a coin. The spear rapped the back of the knee again. Sand stuck to the oil on bronze. The point darted and came away wet. Gregor swung without thinking or looking. The blade traced a blazing semicircle and the nearest gold cloak stepped back so fast his pike clattered. The tip might have sheared off Oberyn's arm if the Dornishman had paused to watch it. He had already gone, breath measured, balance low as a dancer's, finding the thin sea of wind that lives just to one side of a killing stroke. The spears but found pitted steel with a hollow knock and the spearhead slid under the edge of the pauldron. Scraped, drove, diced the invisible meat beneath and came back crimson. Tyrion's eyes kept finding the point. He had seen spearwork before on 100 tourney greens and had heard old stories of the Viper. But this was not story play. It was a man's entire past speaking in the present tense. He could hear the words even before they were said, because they were the words he had heard whispered from Oberyn's mouth in a torchlit cell. A sister's name repeated like the drumbeat under a march. The mountain did not slow. Men like that did not know how. They were made to go forward until something stopped them, the way rivers are made to run until a sea says no. He came in a rush, shield up, sword high, bellowing. The noise rolled off the stone walls. Pigeons flurried from the crenels. A white flock startled into daylight. The spear rang again. Oberyn's mouth formed the syllables for the 20th time. The point flicked the icelet of the helm and scraped sparks. The mountain's sword struck the spear shaft and shaved it to a wedge of lighter wood. Oberyn sprang back, wrist as supple as a whip, and the spear slid through his hands to give him more length. His eyes were very dark, and when he smiled it was the wry, surprised smile of a man finding joy exactly where he expected only blood. "Rape and murder," he said softly, and the soft words traveled as if carried on the spear, reached the stands and the boy with the crown and the old lion with the stone mouth. "Rape and murder Ser Gregor. Say it. Die," growled the man in the mountain, voice a landslide behind iron, and the blade fell, came down like a sentence. The moment fractured. Oberyn leaned. The edge of the sword struck stone and flared sparks like a smith's anvil. Oberyn, already on the other side, drove the spear up beneath the rim of the shield and braced. The haft bent, strained, a sound like a cork squealing from a bottle, wet, immediate, and the spear came away like a needle from flesh. Blood made a brief, glittering net in the sun. The mountain staggered. A sound rose from the press of spectators, the sound of a deep beast drawing breath. Oberyn's bare feet pattered across sand. The spear point nuzzled steel again, licked down, found the line of the greave and the leather thong. It sliced. The thong came free. The greave spun in a little crescent of sunlight and thumped to the earth. The mountain's left calf, pale where no sun had touched it in years, flexed and bled. "Your prince?" a Tyrell lord murmured behind lace. "He plays with him." "Not play." The old woman beside him, thorns worked in silver at her throat, did not smile. "Poetry. Pray he ends the poem before the big one remembers prose." Another sweep of that great sword, but slower now. Oberyn heard breath rasping in the helm like a file on iron. He drove the butt of the spear into the mountain's shield rim. Steel boomed. He sprang past again and the point licked under the arm. A flower of blood opened and closed. The mountain sank to one knee. Oberyn stepped in. For the first time he was too close. The blade roared up, desperate, the backswing a brutal half-circle. Oberyn vaulted, hands on the shield rim, body arcing, a cat tasting the sky. The sword passed under his boots, and he landed behind Gregor with the spear across the man's gorget like a yoke. He twisted, steel ground against steel. The mountain heaved, huge neck muscles bulging against the pressure. "Say her name," Oberyn whispered into the rusted vent of the helm. He pressed the point to the notch where helm met breastplate. A bead of poisoned light trembled there. The mountain's breath growled. "Elia." He got out, dull and hateful and surprised by his own voice. "Elia of Dorne." He coughed, and it was a wet cough. Blood touched his lips within the mask and touched the air in little red motes that made the light look strange. "The whelp," he rumbled, and the word made a shiver cross the crowd. "My lord said." "Which lord?" Oberyn said, voice very clear. A great armored hand came up clutching. He broke two of Gregor's fingers with a twist of the spear haft, and the rest loosened. "Which lord?" Oberyn said again and pushed. The bead of death wavered, then sank a hair's breadth through steel into the soft that lay beyond. "Say the name that bought 2 babes and a princess." The mountain made a noise first. A grunt, the honest sound pain makes when it forgets to lie. And then he said it. "Lanny." His breath hitched as if a hand had pressed his chest. He shuddered. "Lannister, lord." The helm knocked the butt of the spear as he jerked. "TYW." The spear point went in. It did not need to go far. Oberyn's thumb on the shaft was steady, the pressure delicate, the angle exact. The manticore's kiss traveled a short distance and found blood. Gregor convulsed. The yard seemed briefly to tilt as his bulk rocked. The sword, the great weight of it, dropped from his hand into the sand with a thump that sounded like a door closing. Oberyn twisted. The spear point carved a question under the gorget again, and Gregor answered it with a strangled, bubbling snarl. He toppled, face first, a collapsing wall. The impact sent a puff of dust into the air and made the boards beneath Tyrion's feet tremble once. Then the yard was strangely quiet. For a heartbeat, for 2, no one moved. Only the pigeons did, turning, reorienting, then settling again as if nothing in the world had changed. Oberyn stood with the spear lowered, watching the mountain struggle to push himself up on ruined hands. Clegane's gauntlets scrabbled feebly in the sand, left furrows, failed. The helm's mouth gaped. Thick red foam fretted there. A sound like the sea folded over the yard. The small folk exhaled as one. Tyrion let out a breath he had not known he was holding, and it felt like winter leaving a room. The king's herald, whose trade was ceremony and whose hands trembled at blood, found his voice and made it a trumpet. "By the judgment of the gods in trial by combat," he called, "the accused Tyrion of House Lannister is found innocent of the charges of regicide." His voice cracked on the last word and recovered. "By victory of his champion, Prince Oberyn of House Martell." The cheer could have lifted a ship onto its keel. Tywin Lannister did not cheer. His mouth was a straight line that had not learned curves. The only shift was a narrowing around the eyes, as if he peered at a ledger and found an unfamiliar cipher. Cersei's face went white as milk, then red in blotches that looked like bloom on stone fruits left too long in the sun. Oberyn planted the butt of his spear in the sand and leaned upon it lightly, as if it were a walking stick. He angled his face toward the dais and smiled, a bright, courteous smile that had no teeth in it at all. "My thanks to his grace," he said, and made the smallest bow the king of men can take without chafing. "Justice is a sweet wine, well worth the waiting." Gregor rolled onto his back. The helm was a pit of shadow. He tried to draw breath and could not seem to remember how. The poison would be doing its work. Racing, knifing, stiffening the floodways, the heart learning that it would be asked to pay more than it had. Oberyn watched it. Men kill in many ways, and watching is one of them. Someone in a maester's gray stepped from the line near the dais. A narrow man with careful fingers and a gaze that was already taking the measure of Gregor Clegane's dying body. The chain around his neck was incomplete and ugly. Oberyn's eyes shifted to him and stayed. "Bestir the litter," the man in gray said to the gold cloaks without looking at them. Quickly, "The man may live with prompt attention." "I beg leave to." "You beg leave of me?" Oberyn said pleasantly, not moving. The man looked up, resentful and smooth at once. "Of the hand and the king, my prince." Oberyn strode lazily between them and the mountain's body, his spear very light in his fingers. "You may beseech. You will not touch him." "Qyburn," Pycelle wheezed softly beside the hand, tugging at a frayed end of beard with fingers that could not decide what to do. Expelled. Tywin's head turned, a fraction, toward the maester stripped of name. "You will stand down," he said, each word a coin struck cleanly. Qyburn stopped moving and his mouth did as he was told. Lord Tywin's gaze slid to Oberyn. "The remains are for the king's justice, Prince Oberyn, not for the vengeance of any one realm." "The king's justice has spoken," Oberyn replied. "It speaks through judgment, not through charnel house arts." He lifted his gaze to where Tommen Saturday, "Your grace, if it please you, Dorne will have the head that Dorne was promised. The body may go to the stranger as all bodies do. I will light the pyre myself." A breathing pause. The boy looked to his mother first and saw what he was expected to see. A slit of hatred where a mouth should be. Then he looked beyond her, to the grandfather whose face was made of arithmetic. In the space before Tywin Lannister could speak, Margaery Tyrell took a quick, gentle step and leaned to touch the boy's hand with a hand that smelled faintly of roses and new bread. "Mercy is a kind of justice," she murmured, pitched for him alone and yet for all to hear. "Grant the prince what was promised Dorne, and they will call you just." The boy's throat worked. Dorne was promised the head of the man who hurt their princess, he said, stumbling over the cold thing. "So Dorne shall have it. Ser Meryn, see it done." Cersei rounded on Margaery with the look of a cat that has bitten a thorn. Tywin lifted one hand a hair's breadth and the Kingsguard moved as he directed. If he bid them turn their swords on the Viper, the yard would run red. He did not bid that. He counted quickly and found Dorne and a princess in Sunspear, and in that sum was an untidy remainder. Oberyn inclined his head the width of a breeze. "It will be done immediately," he said. His eyes returned to Qyburn, who watched Gregor's staggered breath as a miser watches the last coins in a counting house gutter. "You will not approach him." He smiled, almost regretful. "It is a rare thing when the gods answer a prayer so cleanly." He knelt, quick as the thought itself, and with a single practiced motion drove the spear point under the buckle at the mountain's throat and up. The helm lurched. The breath that had been raking in shallow clutches ceased. The yard swallowed the quiet and held it. There should have been another cheer then. There was not. The crowd knew. Something essential tells the many when a page is turned in a book they are all reading, and the sound it makes is not always jubilant. It is often only the rasp of paper. He cleaned his spear in sand and stood. Before dusk there was a pyre in a small yard of stone beneath the Red Keep's shadow. Soldiers came with axes to cut the crossbars for the bier, and on their faces was the set expression of men required to carry the weight of a legend made meet. Oberyn carried the head himself wrapped in a cloak meant for storms at sea, its weight a hard, round fact against his forearms. He did not look at the face when he laid it upon the block and lifted the axe. The blade came down as if it were tired of hovering. After, he made no show of it, no flourish. He placed the thing that had been Ser Gregor Clegane into a strong chest of ironwood and sealed it with wax and the eight-pointed son of Dorne. Illyria Sand was at his shoulder, silent since the yard. "If you had slipped," she said after a time, watching smoke climb the sunset like a slow, black ivy. "If the spear had found you slower than you were, I would have died," he said, "and you would have sung me a song finer than any sung in King's Landing. I would have left this city to rot." Her hand slid under his elbow and found, with long practice, the place where he rolled his thumb against the inside of his wrist when he needed to remind himself that the world is still warm. "I will sing you no songs until you stop dancing on knives." "I was never careful," he said, smiling at the fire without warmth. "Doran was given the carefulness for both of us. Doran was given gout." She leaned against his shoulder more heavily, as if gambling that there was more of him left than he allowed. "And secrets he cuddles like sleeping children." He turned his head to kiss her hair. Sand clung to it. The street's dust has a different scent in each city. King's Landing smelled of boiled leather and men packed too close together. "Doran wants this head," he said. "The Ironwood will ride with my best men and sail on a ship with a new name. The captain will not drink wine in any tavern where the sailors know his face. 3 times I will send orders to change the ship's name. The skull within will not be half ash when it reaches Sunspear." Illyria watched the smoke, listening to the way it made his voice grainy. After a while she said, "You have more than the head. You have his almost confession. You will want to make it into a whole." "Almosts are the gods' favorite tools," he replied lightly, but she felt the tightness in him. "You and I will not sleep well while Tywin Lannister sleeps. There is the balance of it. You want to knock him off his balance." "I want him to fall," Oberyn said, cheerful and vicious all at once. "Perhaps the fall will be slow. That is sometimes more instructive." He watched a set of shadows move beyond the edge of the firelight, the angular shadows of men who understand that their faces might someday be asked to answer for what was done with them. "Varys will come," he added. "He is a creature who loves to watch falling done with grace." The eunuch arrived as if summoned by his naming. He came as fog comes, unhurried and everywhere at once. "My prince," Varys said, with his soft smile and soft hands folded in sleeves soft as a kitten's belly. "May I say first, from the depths of my heart, that your dancing today was most instructive. You may say it from the depths of your throat where your heart never learned to live," Oberyn said, but he was amused. "You will have heard the mountain say, TYW, before the spear found its better task." Indeed, Varys's eyes went briefly bright before their lids tamed them. "So did all the worthy citizens of our fair city, who are never slow to share what they think to be kernels of truth. The baker outside the Dragon Gate has already told 10 men that the Hand named himself the Midnight King and ordered the princess's murder as a proof for his crown." Oberyn snorted. "The baker should bake." "The baker should bake," Varys agreed. "And men of sense should not let too much story take root. But some story must. The tale that grows may prove to be tenderly pruned, if the gardener keeps ahead of the shoots." "You," Illyria said, and did not hide her distaste. "Any gardener," Varys corrected gently. I come because the head of the city watch. He skewered the words delicately. May be asked to confiscate the mortal remains of the criminal. The laws of the city are particular about corpses of great men, and Ser Gregor has been, alas, great. He was never great, Oberyn said. He was only large. Words are the ribs of laws, my prince, Varys replied sympathetically. Though ribs crack under pressure, I have taken the liberty of relieving the watch commander of an urgent need to act. He will presently suffer a stomach upset which my grandmother might have called justice, but my maesters would call bad fish. Oberyn's teeth flashed. Varys, you make the actual filth of this city seem decorous. Flattery, Varys sighed. I blush. He inclined his head toward the ironwood chest. This will go to Dorne? It will be in Dorne's hands before the next moon's turn. Oberyn's face, turned to the firelight, went grave. And Tywin Lannister will be told it is there, and that it will look at him forever from Sunspear's high tower if he sets foot within sight of our sea. He should know what eyes look like after such a life. Varys weighed that with his face. You make an emblem, he said. The city will make 1,000 of it. Stories will wear it as they go to market. You are quick, my prince. Might I be permitted a few accompanying suggestions? Only so nothing untidy spoils the taste. Speak, Oberyn said. He did not say please. And do not take long. I mean to sleep tonight. 2. Men must publicly confirm the earlier pledge that Dorne will be made whole by the king's justice. Varys began, counting discreetly with a fingertip inside his sleeve. A proclamation tomorrow naming Ser Gregor's crimes against the royal house and ordering House Clegane's lands held in abeyance until the crown decrees their settlement. If you press to take the lands in your own name, you will make enemies who do not wake when shouted at. If you refrain, you will make friends who knock at your door uninvited. Friends can be dismissed. Enemies must be fed. I'll feed them bones, Oberyn said. Continue. The small council will convene, Varys said. And it will be convenient if Grand Maester Pycelle remembers, in a moment of dignity, that Lord Tywin gave certain orders on the night the city was opened to Lord Stark's conqueror. He watched Oberyn to see if he would flinch. He did not. Nothing that names the one thing you most desire to hear, but enough for a climate. You will peel Pycelle like an overripe fruit, Oberyn said, and leave the juice to run where it will. Only the thinnest trickle, Varys said modestly. I aim for dampness, not flood. Tywin will move to silence any man whose tongue wags too liberally. Oberyn said it as one speaks of rain in cloud season. He may think too, said Varys. Yet he must move with the caution of a man whose grandson sits in a snow-white chair and whose granddaughter lives under a southern sun. He must build a bridge for himself before he takes away the bridges of others. Illyria made a small sound between annoyance and admiration. You too build bridges out of smoke and expect men to walk them. Some men are lighter than others, Varys said gravely. That night Oberyn slept for a little while like a man who had done a thing fully and laid his head down on the thing itself. He woke before dawn as men do who have learned to value hours. In the just light he went to the small yard again. The pyre was ash. The ashes were cool. He knelt and pressed both hands into them, and the fine gray powder clung to his palms as if in love. At morning's court, the boy king ratified with a clear, high voice what his herald had proclaimed the day before. A man with shoulders like a yoke and hands like slabs came forward with a painted board on a pole, listing with careful letters the crimes of Ser Gregor Clegane against the realm. The board tottered. The letters endured. Tommen stumbled only once and Marjorie's thumb brushed his wrist with a touch that steadied the world. Cersei watched with her mouth shut like a purse full of coins not hers to spend. Tywin's silence was of another kind and older. Oberyn felt it like a winter wind that does not move the leaves but teaches each leaf how thin it really is. When the court broke and courtiers burst into little colorful flocks like fish startled by a larger fish walking through their water, Tywin turned to Oberyn and bowed just the right depth for a prince. I trust Dorne finds itself appeased, he said. We all grieve the events of 16 years past. I have long grieved them. "You should keep better company," Oberyn said serenely. "You often seem to share the table with grief." Tywin's face did nothing. "I share my table with victory," he replied evenly. "Together they salt the meat. Then take a lighter hand with the salt." Oberyn smiled. "Clegane's skull will sit high in Sunspear. The children who climb the prince's tower will see it and learn what grows in the garden when men plant murder. Children learn more from bread than from bones," Tywin said, and that was near a kindness, for it was a truth. "Dorne has bread because men like me do the sums." "Dorne will keep its own sums," Oberyn answered. "And now that the gods have spoken, we will go on to the second reckoning." Tywin allowed his lids to drop briefly in what some men mistook for a blink. "We are done, Prince Oberyn. Your man won. Your cause is served. The realm has no appetite for opening the cupboards of an old war." "The cupboards are open," Oberyn said lightly. "The flies already know." He leaned in a fraction, enough that the gold of Tywin's eyes caught little flecks of light from a brazier, and said very gently, "You will answer for ordering the sack that killed the princess of my house." Tywin could have struck a man across the face with less violence than there was in the angle of his jaw. "Orders were given for the gates to be opened to prevent the city's burning and rape," he said. "Unfortunately, the men who entered were men. If you desire to try the Lord of Casterly Rock with the crimes of every man who ever rode beneath his banner, then begin with your own princes of the sand. I am sure I could find mothers who weep in the stepstones and the marches." "I do not try you," Oberyn said. "I hunt you. It is different." "Be sure of your spear's reach," Tywin replied, and turned away because men like him do not gift their enemies the sight of their back until they intend something. Tyrion found the world's light very bright that day. It struck him with the brashness of a youth who thinks he is making a good impression. He moved through the passages of the Red Keep like a man walking in his childhood home after a long absence, noting what had been repaired and what left to squeak. He ought, he knew, to have been hurried out of sight. Men rejoiced to see the gods' will when it aligned with their notions of fairness, and men also knew that fairness eats like a starving dog once it smells meat. He found Jaime in a passageway where sun fell in a blade of dust between two shuttered slits. Jaime still wore white, and the white still sat oddly on him, like penance worn with pride because there was nothing else to wear. He looked his brother over and let a breath out. "You've a talent for lingering," he said. "The city's tongue will start wagging if it sees you so free." "The city's tongue wagged me into a noose and back," Tyrion said. "I should let it tire itself." "You should let me tire it for you." Jaime made a face at the things he had to say. "Father wants you to go to Casterly Rock. He thinks distance will make your innocence seem more decorous. Father thinks Casterly Rock is a cure for every ill except the one that has vexed him most his life," Tyrion said. "And I am the ill." Jaime's jaw worked, and he decided not to argue with the clean blade of that. "He will not throw you into some oubliette simply because his champion fell. He is too clever. Too proud," Tyrion said. "We are too many things to list, and none of them make good fathers." He watched Jaime's mouth open, the words mustering, then halt. "I never thanked you for refusing to be mine," Cersei asked. "You declined." "I keep my vows now," Jaime said, looking at the dust with a curious intensity. "Even when they taste terrible. They taste terrible because they are the only honest food you've eaten in years," Tyrion said. He laid a hand on his brother's sleeve where it covered a scar that had never healed quite right. "Thank you all the same." Jaime nodded like a man acknowledging the sun's rising. "Be gone from here by nightfall if you can," he said. "The court will want to use you in 20 different ways. If you are not here, it will have to use someone else." "Shay is here," Tyrion said, and there, in the naming, was the pain as clean as a lance thrust. She sat as a witness who knew the truth and told another because she did not like the truth she had. Jaime's face was unhappy. "Leave her be." "I will leave her be," Tyrion said. "I will leave so many things be that I used to touch because they were the only things that remembered my hands." He did not go to her. He went down to the harbor instead. He walked among nets drying on racks and boys shouting insults that were practiced for manhood and women haggling with men whose fish went bad if their temper went long. He watched the blue of the bay broken by the backs of ships moving slowly, as if they were great beasts surfacing after long swims. In the afternoon, the small council sat. They sat because business must be done in winter and summer both. Lord Tywin presided with his inkwell and his stack of briefings. Mace Tyrell talked at great length about grain, and Ondine's smile inched like a patient cat. Pycelle wheezed about pox in the river wards and a need for more vinegar. The master of ships worried his ring and mentioned pirates enough times that the word lost the shape of meaning. Varys, humming with the pleasure of being needed, offered a note about unrest along the Rose Road and a promise to know why very soon. And finally, Tywin said, as if finally were a word that any man could say to history and be believed, we confirm the king's proclamation of this morning. Ser Gregor Clegane is declared forfeit of life and lands for crimes against the royal house. House Clegane's properties will be held by the crown pending disposition. The remains will be, his eyes flicked to Oberyn, sent as his grace sees fit. As his grace has already seen fit, Oberyn said. They are ash and iron by now. Indeed, Tywin said, and it was not a question. If it please the council, Varys said, with a delicacy that made Pycelle bristle in anticipation like a cat sensing a draft. It may be recorded in the minutes that on the night the Lion's Gate was opened to Lord Stark during the sack, that lamentable night, orders were given that the royal apartments were to be secured at all cost. Grand Maester Pycelle will recall, I am sure, who gave that wise instruction, and how earnestly he urged order. Pycelle turned toward the eunuch with old Hotur and old Fear both confiding themselves to him at once. It is a matter of record, he said grudgingly, that the Lord of Casterly Rock counseled mercy, where possible, and decorum. He fiddled with a thrum of chain, eyes watering. Men can be coarse in victory, it is known. And men accepted such counsel? Oberyn asked pleasantly. Men like Ser Amory Lorch, men like Ser Gregor Clegane. Some did, Pycelle said. Some. He trailed off and his mouth trembled. War is lamentable. We all regret. Regret is as cheap as salt, Oberyn said, smiling, and Varys' eyes flickered. I prefer wine. It costs something. When the council rose, Tywin lingered. He turned to Varys and said, the minutes will record the king's proclamation. They will not record anecdotes. His voice did not lift. It did not need to. The minutes record what is said. Varys answered, broad and bland as butter. Of course, if nothing is said, they record even less. See that nothing is said of what you said, Tywin said, and left with his scratch on the day's stone. In the days that followed the duel, King's Landing did what cities do when a stone is dropped in their water. Circles widened. Stories braided themselves like girls' hair, and then frayed. A vendor at the street of flour sold pastries shaped like a great helm, sugar-crusted and hollow within. Sellswords leaned in tavern corners and argued about whether poison was the same as skill, and whether such questions mattered when breath ceased either way. In the poorer alleys there were songs, rough-throated, about a laughing prince who leaped over a mountain and nailed a lion's shadow to the wall with a thorn. In the septs, prayers were said for the soul of a man who had done evil and for the souls of men who would do evil if left at their meat and drink too long. The city stank as it always stank, of humanity and heat and the iron that runs in things. But when it rained, the smell lifted clean for a few moments and men believed they could breathe different air. A raven with a ribbon of yellow silk sewn clumsily to its leg came down on the parapet of Sunspear at dusk on the 7th day. Ariohoda was there, as he was often there, because high places give a man who is charged with watching a better kind of sight. He took the bird's babble and stilled it with a handful of seeds, then with strong fingers unwound the ribbon and the fine cylinder bound beneath it. He brought the message to his prince. Doran Martell read it once, then again, and placed it very carefully on the old table scarred from knives and cups and older things. He closed his eyes, and Ario watched the line between his brows soften, as if a knot had been loosened in a rope left too long in the rain. When he opened his eyes again, They were wet beneath the light and fierce above it. "Gregor," he said to the room, "at last." "Your brother sends the skull," Areo said, because he knew what was in the cylinder and also what was in the man who held it. "My brother sends me the proof that 15,000 dreams were not dreaming lies," Doran answered. "He sends me a calculation solved. He sends me a story with a different ending than the one I have told myself for half my life." He laughed, once not loudly. "He also sends me trouble. He is generous in his gifts. Trouble can be salted and kept," Areo observed. "Some trouble," said Doran. "Trouble that does not bleed. Oberyn's trouble bleeds and smiles while it does it." He touched the cylinder with his fingertips as if taking its temperature. "He will be pressing Tywin Lannister as if Tywin is a bruise. He will tempt Varys to be more helpful than Varys has the right to be." "You have wanted this," Areo said gently, "all your quiet years." "I have wanted justice," Doran said, and the word came out like a thing he had rehearsed until it broke. "And I have wanted peace, the peace that lets my children be more than vessels for the thirst of men with songs in their mouths." He looked up at the window where the red light was running like spilled wine down the plaster. "Sometimes the two want to sit in different chairs at the same table." "My prince," Areo said after a time. "Arianne asks to speak with you. She always asks when I am weakest," Doran said, and smiled with both love and warning. "Let her in, Areo. I must be reminded that victory is a coin we must pay out as carefully as we hoard it." Arianne came like summer, hot and competent, eyes with laughter at their corners even when laughter was not invited. She kissed her father's brow, carefully, and sat without being bidden, as if this were her right and had always been. "The city speaks," she said. "It speaks of Oberyn as if he was the seven made into a man. They say he speared the sky and pulled the sun down to look into. They say he will bring Tywin's head next in the iron chest, and that he will dip it in honey so we can keep it fresh and show it to our children." Doran smiled in spite of himself. "What does Arianne say?" "I say we must not spill our honey," she replied, crossing one long leg smoothly over the other. "Father, this is the moment. The girl with the crown's sister sits in our walls. The boy in King's Landing has a crown that fits like a hat borrowed from a taller friend. If we offer the right thing, we can have a thing we have played at wanting only in story." "You mean to crown Myrcella?" Doran said. His voice did not change, but the words made the room different. "In Dorne," she said, touching his hand with coaxing fingers. "By our law, the elder child inherits. We will not be rebels. We will be correct. We will put a queen with hair like sunshine on the throne by way of the long, hot road instead of the short, bloody one. The realm will grumble and then arrange itself." "The realm never arranges itself," Doran said softly. "Men arrange it, and they are restless hands." He looked past her to where the sea would be if the wall were not in the way. "Oberyn in King's Landing will be turning their restlessness to other uses." "Oberyn is a good knife," Arianne said, fire in her. "Knives are used. He will carve us a place to sit in the sun while they gnaw at their own bones in the shade." Doran looked at his daughter and loved her as a man loves the way a river sounds at night. "You will wait," he said. She laughed, in disbelief first and then in humor because she could not endure a world without it. "Father, you ask the sea to stand still when the moon is high. I ask you to be my daughter," he said. "Not the moon." He lifted the cylinder that had come with the skull's promise. "Tell Areo to double the guard on Myrcella and to let it be known he has done so. We will not crown her like a bolt from the blue. We will crown her like dawn, and if the day is not right, we will keep tonight a little longer." She did not like it. She never liked waiting. But she nodded because she could read the weight in his words the way a woman reads the quality of cloth buying it from a man who smiles too much. Back in King's Landing, Oberyn kept to the rhythm of the city and added 2 notes of his own. He went to the Street of Silk with Ilaria and bought perfumed oils for his daughters, who were not there to use them, and a painted scarf for a whore he had sometimes sat beside when he did not feel like being with anyone. He drank wine in a tavern with a cracked signboard showing a red vulture, and he gambled for coins he did not care about, and he laughed too loudly, and he let the men who wanted to love him for killing their fears shape in the world touch his sleeve as he passed, and he waved the boys away who wanted to be near a spear so they could tell their grandchildren the nearness. He met Varys in odd places, a corridor that smelled of vinegar and parchment, a garden where the orange trees tried stubbornly to learn to love the salt-tinged wind, a storeroom where old banners slept and woke sometimes and cried without voices. Each time Varys brought him petals of rumor and Oberyn blew them to see which way they turned. "Ser Kevin rides for the rock with messages," Varys reported softly one day, alighting on a bench as if benches existed to be alighted on by men like him. "He is a paring knife of a man, little show and conservative in his cuts. Do not confuse him with softness. If Lord Tywin sends him, Lord Tywin thinks the letter will need explaining to men who do sums with their fingers." "What message is that?" Oberyn asked, without looking at the spider, watching instead two boys with sticks stage a duel in the dust. "That the West will not be asked to wear a hair shirt simply because a mountain fell in the capital," Varys said. "That the Lord of Casterly Rock will not allow an aria to be sung in lieu of an account. Tell me, my prince, do you think him capable of ordering the death you care for?" "Yes," Oberyn said. "You think him capable, or do you know him to have done it?" Varys's head tilted. "The city hears it as fact and will build on it as if it were rock. But rock gives way in high water. I think the man who turned a wedding into a knife is capable of giving any order that seems profitable at the time," Oberyn said. "I think he understands how to look at other men and see wheat in the wind and what scythe to use. I think he told his dogs to go in and leave no man, woman, or child who might later be used to say the old luck still lived. And if you cannot prove it," Varys said gently, "how will you kill a legend that wears a man's skin and a man's name?" "I will not kill him," Oberyn said, with a smile like a blade being resheathed. "I will force the world to make him what he is. He feeds on the world's attention. I will salt it." Varys studied him for a long moment and then laughed, a soft little breath. "You terrify me," he said with unexpected honesty. "You make me believe in things I have forgotten to keep in my purse, like justice." "Keep flattery," Oberyn said. "Give me papers." In public, Tywin moved less than the sun. In private, he moved enough. He met with sailors and men whose boots had seen salt. He met with a tanner whose hides were stamped with a crescent moon. He met with a woman who dyed wool in a courtyard off the hook and whose dye vats were deep enough to hide a body in, if a man had wanted to hide a body. He met with Ser Adam, who kept the gold cloak's discipline from turning into mere cruelty, and told him very calmly that if his men so much as breathed the possibility of taking the Dornish prince into their hands, those men would later breathe no more at all. He sent money by the quietest roads coins can take. He slept 4 hours in 24, and they were the exact 4 hours he needed. Cersei slept badly and drank in the daylight. She watched her son smile at a girl with roses and wanted to scratch the smile from his face and throw the roses into a fire. She watched her father write without ceasing and wanted to seize the quill and write in its place. "Give me back the world where my will is a kind of law." She sent men to follow Oberyn, then men to follow those men. Then she called those men back because she had dreamed a terrible dream in which her daughter's hair went black as soot and her eyes turned to chips of night. She wrote a letter to Sunspear, blacking the quill 3 times, and tore it up each time because in no version did she emerge crowned with her old inviolability. She burned the last of her letter in her hearth, and the smoke smelt like something fair twisted wrong. In the 7th week after the mountain fell, Tywin proposed a feast. He proposed it with the air of a man allowing a child to play with a toy after the child had been good. He ordered 100 bird pies and wine from Arbor, and a whole boar carried in with apples in its eyes. The city loves a feast. It loves shorthand to explain seasons to itself. Men came and ate and sang and forgot for a moment that they wanted other things. The hand drank little, as he always did. He rose when the laughter was highest and the chaos most sweet. He raised a cup and said, "For King Tommen's justice." He did not look toward Oberyn when he said it, and the man he did look at was his grandson. Oberyn drank and laughed too loudly, and danced with a Tyrell cousin whose collarbones delighted him. He pressed past men with trays of sugared lemons and leaned at the window to let salt air clean the grease of merriment from his nose. When he turned, Varys was there, with a white face that had seen something it wished to unsee and also wished to tell. "Be quick," Oberyn said lightly. "I am dancing." "A boy has been found," Varys said. "Found by the wrong men. Heard, I should say, by them. He sells chestnuts in winter, and in summer he sells baskets of cherries that he claims come from High Garden, but in truth come from a garden behind his aunt's bakehouse. He sleeps on a shelf near the kitchens, and he heard a man who calls himself a maester speak with a man who calls himself the double of a dead man. They spoke in the way men speak when they are alone and think themselves unheard." Oberyn's skin prickled, pleasantly and sourly, at once. "Say what they said." "The one who says he is a maester spoke of how well the great man's body would respond to lost arts when the right herbs were employed and the right squeezing of stoppers applied," Varys breathed. "But the night after the trial, he went to the yard with his tray of blades and bottles and found it already ash. He spoke of how inconvenient it is when fire finds flesh too early. He spoke of how the head he had wanted is ironed away to a different use. The ironwood chest," Oberyn said, annoyed at himself for the proud little leap of satisfaction that his care had found praise from an enemy's mouth. "What man will this dead man double?" "A man the queen wishes to have that most rare of qualities," Varys said delicately. "Silence. Too late." Oberyn's laugh had no humor in it now. "I like him better singing." In the weeks that followed the feast, the city's songs turned. They had sung of the viper cutting a mountain's throat. Now they sang, cautiously and in corners, of the hand who had opened gates and looked away while men went in like wolves. The singers who sang so boldly were the ones with knives in their sleeves. 2 were found floating where the water under the bridge is bad. Faces knocked into a sameness. But for each singer gone, a baker's boy sang as he kneaded, or a dyer hummed as she lifted wool from a vat, and the thing that had been fact in one room became rumor in a second and conviction in a third. Tywin wanted winter when rumor grows brittle with cold. He sent word to the Riverlands that the crown's justice required a show of peace in a place that had known only the opposite, and he would bring that show and a purse of coin to sweeten it. He did sums in his head about grain and mail and the way a realm's appetite is sometimes satisfied by seeing bread rise and a lord bend. Oberyn wanted fire. He whispered to Varys, and Varys whispered to one of the blue-skinned boys who served a merchant of Volantis, and the boy, who had never sailed further than Blackwater Bay, wrote a letter in his bad hand and put on it a seal that had no right to be on anything. The letter went to a man who called himself a maester but wore no chain, and the man brought it to a queen, and the queen brought it to her father, and her father read words that spoke of a prince with hair the color of midnight and eyes like the narrow sea and the weight of an old name well fitted to new shoulders. Tywin read the letter twice. He did not let his mouth or eyes change. He sent the man who bore it down to the cells beneath the red keep to rest from his journey. The man did not wake. Tywin burned the letter over a candle that smoked a little and left a black smear on his thumb. Later, when they were alone, he said to Cersei, "There are always boys with black hair who look convincing in the right light. We will not be moved by every story a eunuch fancies on a rainy day." Cersei, whose thoughts could be provoked into stampedes by the slightest shout, said, "If dragons come." "There are no dragons," Tywin said, banging each word like a nail. "There are men who want you to fear dragons, because fear makes you smaller. Stop making yourself smaller, Cersei." She sat. She looked at her hands and thought of a boy with cats and a girl with roses and a father who had become a wall that the world must flow around. Her hatred was a blanket she pulled up when rooms were cold. She pulled it now and looked at Oberyn Martell across a hall and thought, not for the first time, of poison. On the night that was to carry Tywin to the Riverlands, something happened that the city would not agree upon for years. Some said a cupbearer got drunk and poured not wine but a different red into the hand's cup. Some said a Tyrell, bored and brilliant, decided to accept a debt owed by a mother for a son's death and paid it in a coin the mother could not trace. Some said the gods sent an apoplexy to a man who had pinched too much life between finger and thumb to count without accounting. Oberyn was in his manse with Ilaria, playing Sivas with himself because she found the game too tedious, when a knock came, loud and uneven. It was Jaime who stood in the courtyard, hair damp with rain and white cloak spattered with mud. He looked like a man who has come to ask forgiveness from a god he isn't sure exists. "Tyrion," he said, before Oberyn asked. "I have him." He could not be kept in a gilded coop any longer. Father meant to take him to the rock and scour off the city's stink with salt. He would have been cleaner, but not safer. "I am a poor brother if I let him go to a place where he will die slowly of nothing." "Free men die slowly of nothing every day," Oberyn said. "Sit. Drink. Tell me why you are soaked on a night that has not yet decided to rain." Jaime did not sit. He stood like a statue set at the wrong angle. "Father lies abed with a face that looks like an emptied purse," he said flatly. "His mouth is a line that wants to be a circle and cannot. Maesters cluck and speak of humors and blocked winds. Cersei laughs and cries in the same breath because her heart is broken for the man who never allowed her one in his schedule. Varys tells me it will not mend. He tells me private things in private voices, and I do not know if I should let a fly crawl inside my ear to get at my thoughts." Oberyn felt involuntarily a lift. Not pleasure, not triumph. Something thinner and more honest, like a string pulled tight suddenly sounding. "Tywin Lannister," he said softly. "Is he dying?" "He dies as careful men die, counting their breaths," Jaime said wearily. "He may count until morning. He may count until next week. He will not count long." "Poison?" Ilaria asked in a voice that had neither delight nor fear, only the interest a woman takes in seeing a tale told to the end. "Maester says no," Jaime said. "Father did not choke or clutch or spit foam. He simply broke somewhere inside where the best work had been done. The Maester used words that sounded like a tinker's box spilled. He does not know why. Men seldom know why anything ends. They know only that it does. Men know why," Oberyn said, and stood, and went to the window and looked out at a city that lay like a cat with its belly exposed. "Because something presses long enough in the right place. Eventually it gives." He turned back. "Where is Tyrion?" "In a room below stones that have not moved in 100 years, Jaime said. "Varys has a key that unlocks every lock made by men who learn to obey other men." "I came to ask." "What?" "To ask if you mean to pluck him from my hand," Jaime said. "To show him in a square and say to the city, 'Here is a dwarf who killed a king and walked free, and here also is justice laughing.'" Oberyn stepped close. He studied the man who had once been the finest swordsman in the realm and now wore his sword like an old injury. "You hate what you are becoming," he said, not unkindly. Jaime laughed and the sound broke. "I hate recognizing myself in a mirror. I hate believing that the only honest thing I have done in years was pushing a woman into a boat and watching her sail away to a place where being honest might keep her alive." "Then do more honest things," Oberyn said. "Take your brother out by the way Varys shows you, and do not look back. The city will not notice one less man leaving because tonight it is counting something else." Jaime swallowed. "And if father dies while he is gone? Then he dies," Oberyn said. "What would his dying buy you? He would leave you what he always meant to leave you. A task you cannot complete and a name too heavy to wear." Jaime looked at him long and then nodded once, like a soldier taking a command his bones agree with. He turned to go. "Jaime," Oberyn said. The Kingslayer paused. "When he dies, and he will die, remember that men like him always imagine their deaths as statements. Make his a silence." Jaime stared at him and then was gone, a white shadow in rain that had now begun. The city knew by noon the next day. It did not know because a bell tolled. It knew because merchants set prices lower for a few hours the way hunters loose arrows into a flock with a shout to make the birds rise and show which are fat and which lean. It knew because the queen appeared with hair uncombed and had dressed mismatched, lion red and a green that did not trouble itself to match any crest, and because Mace Tyrell spoke loudly and patted Tommen on the back as if he were a dog that had just carried a pheasant properly. It knew because Pycelle said, "Alas," 10 times between the great doors and the dais. Tywin Lannister died with a straight mouth. Oberyn went to the sept and laid a golden coin in a blind beggar's bowl. He went to the dock and watched a gull dip and clap its wings and lift fish from water with a perfection that looked like something men had taught it. He went to a quiet room and took from a chest a small vial in which 3 drops of oil trembled and clung. He held it up to the light and watched the drops wobble together. "These are yours?" Ellaria asked. "These are Dorne's," he said. He put the vial back and shut the chest and turned the key. "And used. It pleases me to let them live." "You did not," she began, and stopped, because he put a finger to her mouth endearingly. "I did not," he said. "Men will say I did, and I will not trouble to say otherwise. He was a wall I did not need to hammer down. It is better that he fell because he was what he was." "Did you want his death?" Ellaria asked. "I wanted Elijah's name to be a blade he could no longer step around," Oberyn said. "This will do." The court arranged itself as courts do when the rock in their river is gone. Mace Tyrell made his shape bigger. Kevan Lannister stood where his brother had stood and failed to fill the space but managed to be the space that was now available. Cersei smiled through teeth and showed roses her stem. Tommen cried once, and quietly, and did the work a boy king does because the men around him have decided that work will be done. At night, Oberyn and Varys met again, and the spider looked at him with a teacher's pleased regret for a student who has taught himself something without sharing his notes. "So," Varys said, "the lion sleeps." "Lions never sleep long," Oberyn said. "They wake hungry." "Do you?" Varys asked lightly. "Wake hungry." "I sleep hungry," Oberyn said with a smile, and Varys laughed like a cushion being pressed. In Sunspear, Doran received the ironwood chest. He had it carried to a high chamber where the sea speaks the loudest. He sat with it as a man sits with an old friend he never thought to see again, and then opened it and looked, and the sound he made was not a cry and not laughter but some third thing that men make only when a thing long carried inside them realizes it can be set down. "Justice," Areo said, "because there are times the word must be said aloud to make it occupy a room as it should." "Justice of a sort," Doran answered, and touched the bone with his fingertips like a priest blessing a child. "The rest of the sum must still be done. Perhaps slower sums yield surer answers." He sat long with the skull. When he rose, he instructed that a niche be carved in the highest wall of the prince's tower, and that the skull be set there with iron rings so that the wind would find it and sing through its hollows. He ordered that no bird might nest in it. He intended that the sea and sun between them would bleach it until it was a white lesson. Oberyn returned to the Red Keep's yard one evening alone when the air was a little cooler and the light slid off the walls in tired sheets. He stood where the mountain had fallen and pressed his foot into the sand as if testing if the earth remembered a weight. "It remembers everything." "You did what you said you would," a voice said behind him. Jaime stood there with his hands behind him, unarmed but wearing the suggestion of a sword. "You made the world speak a name the way you wanted it to." "I was careful," Oberyn said, which made Jaime laugh without mirth. "Carefulness sits oddly on you," the Kingslayer said. "Like white sits on me." "Better to wear odd clothes than to run naked," Oberyn said. "Nakedness is only for gods and fools, and I try to be neither very often." Jaime's eyes were tired but not dull. "He is gone," he said, meaning Tywin. "Sometimes I think the air is different now, lighter. Then I remember I am the same man and the air is the same air, and only a chair is empty." "Empty chairs leave room for other men to sit," Oberyn said. "It is what men do with the sitting that matters." "And you?" Jaime asked. "What will you do?" "Eat," Oberyn said. "Sleep. Write a long letter to my brother that says very little about the business that has been done and a great deal about a red-haired fishmonger who swears like a man in a song. Watch the city a little while longer until I am sure it does not wish to swallow me while I am not watching. Then I will go home because no matter how much wine you drink here, it does not warm the bones the way it does there." "And Tywin's ghost?" Jaime asked with a grim smile. "He will haunt you more than me," Oberyn said. "I never fed him." At dawn 2 days later, Oberyn and Illyria stood upon a ship whose name had been changed twice since the mountain skull had sailed upon it. The sailors made busy with ropes and shouted at the sun to show itself. In the harbor, gulls wrote their rude sentences on the wind. On the quay, Marjorie Tyrell and her grandmother stood, incongruous in their best, as if they meant to see a friend off and not a current that had changed the river's course. "Prince," the old woman said with her thorns gleaming, "you leave us with a hole in the air where a song used to be." "I will send you other songs," Oberyn promised, bowing, "and wine to pour into them." She said, unconvinced. "Send bread, not only wine. Bread builds cities. Wine only makes them forget to tear themselves down." Marjorie smiled at him over her grandmother's shoulder. "Travel safely," she said, "and be kind to your daughters. Men who go home angry make daughters into weapons." She lifted a hand, a light thing. "Do not make yours bleed for you." "I have bled enough for all of us," Oberyn said, and meant to make that true. He took Illyria's hand and squeezed it once hard, and when the ship slid from the harbor's throat into the wider mouth of sea, he stood with his feet braced and felt the lift and fall of water become the measure of his breath. Behind him, King's Landing set about the work of setting itself right in the new arrangement. Men who had eaten at Tywin's table found other tables, or went hungry learning how. Cersei sharpened and blunted herself against anything that would take an edge. Kevin wrapped the realm in blankets and told it bedtime stories about order. Varys moved lightly through his tunnels and wrote his own long letter to a friend beyond the narrow sea about a boy with a bold name and a future like a drawn bow. Jaime stood on the walls at night and listened to the city breathe. In Sunspear, the skull on its iron rings found the wind. It tuned itself to the sea and made a thin music that only children and princes heard when they pressed their ears to stone. Doran climbed the prince's tower carefully, each step measured and true, and stood with his hand on the skull, a while watching a line of cloud far offshore shift and reshape until it made a dragon that did not last. Justice is not a door that closes. It is a stair that wins. Some men tire and sit. Others climb and call back to those below to keep coming. Oberyn Martell stood on the deck of the ship that bore him home and let the sun slide onto his face. He thought of Elia with the even steadiness of a man who has learned that remembering is work and not a wound. He thought of Tywin lying in his fine linens learning how little they could do for him now. He thought of the skull on its shelf and of the sound the wind would make through it at night, a sound like an exhalation. Illyria leaned on him. "Sleep," she said. "Soon," he said, "there will be letters." His smile crooked. "And then, for once, there will be quiet." "For once," she said, dry and fond. And he kissed her hair and closed his eyes and let the long, patient breath of the sea tell him the rest of the story in its own time.